Thanks for joining me again. We need to talk today about ancient India up through the classical era. And when I refer to India, I'm not talking about the current geopolitical state of India. Instead, I'm talking about, in a larger sense, the Indian subcontinent, which encompasses not just the country of India, but Sri Lanka, Burma, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, a very diverse place. You can see from the topographic map that I have listed here about how you've got desert regions, the large flat Deccan Plateau in the middle. You've got areas that receive quite a bit of rainfall all year round, jungle regions, especially as you move to the southern tip of the peninsula. Then to the north, you'll see the highest mountain range in the world, that of the Himalayas. And so for this region, it has always been and remains today an incredibly diverse region in terms of ethnicities, languages, cultural customs, and religions. This area has also been the recipient of a number of outside invasion forces throughout the centuries, actually throughout the millennia. We'll talk about the first with the Aryan invasion here in just a few minutes, but just this region seems to be a crossroads for different civilizations, with Alexander the Great, for instance, invading the western edge of India in the 3rd century BC, bringing with him certain aspects of Hellenic culture. In the 5th century AD, we'll see Hun invaders coming in, sweeping in from Central Europe. Fast forward to the 8th and 9th centuries AD, and we'll have some of the first Muslim invaders. It's just a very dynamic and, as I said, incredibly rich and diverse region. So we begin with the so-called Indus Valley civilization. These appear to have been the original inhabitants of the region back after the Neolithic Revolution. These folks are settling down in walled towns. They're growing cotton, barley, and wheat, among other crops. They were technologically a Bronze Age civilization and a polytheistic peoples who worship many different gods. Another term for the Indus Valley civilization is the Harappan peoples. This name comes from one of the largest urban areas of the Indus Valley civilization. One of their larger cities was named Harappa, and these people live in very, very elaborate, complex, mathematically planned out cities with sewer systems. They will be the first civilization to learn how to get rid of human waste and to bring in fresh water well before the Romans learned that same technology. So a very sophisticated civilization. Unfortunately, we know very little about them, because the writing system that they developed has yet to be decoded. Once it does, it will open up a wealth of new information about who these earliest peoples were. In the first of what would turn out to be many different waves of foreign invasion, we'll see the so-called Aryan civilization sweeping into the Indus Valley region around the 16th and 15th centuries BC. We believe that the Aryans likely came from the Iranian plateau and may have had a cultural link, a religious link to the Persians. We do know they were a warlike civilization who used their superior weapons. They have already learned how to forge iron weapons and tools. That they will use this in part to come in, sweep in, and dominate the native Indus Valley peoples. And we look back upon this age, the so-called Vedic Age of the Aryan invasion, as important for two major reasons. That we start to see the faith of Hinduism slowly beginning to kind of create itself during this period. And we'll also see the caste system introduced by the Aryans. Right, so now is a good time for us to understand what Hinduism is, and that's a tall order. Hinduism is kind of a difficult concept to grasp. It really probably starts out from the polytheistic faith of the Indus Valley or Harappan peoples, intermingled with the polytheistic faith of the Aryans, who have just come in and set about dominating the region. And what we know is that Hinduism emphasizes living a very virtuous life and treating all living beings with respect. And the ultimate goal of all Hindu believers is to reunite with the spirit of Brahma. The problem that comes in with going back home The spirit of Brahma is considered to be sort of the overarching holy essence, the creative force in the universe. The problem with doing that is that your soul has to be completely clean. You have to have lived the most exemplary life possible, done nothing virtually wrong. You have to have built up a great deal of good karma and minimized your bad karma. The term karma simply means sort of a cosmic checklist of all your good and bad deeds. So you can have good karma, helping the old lady across the street, or you can have bad karma, cheating on your taxes, or these sorts of things. You want to maximize your good karma and minimize your bad karma so that your soul is ready to go home and reunite with the spirit of Brahma. For many people, this is such a formidable task that, according to Hindu belief, they do allow for the concept of reincarnation, which means that your soul can outlive its current bodily form and be reincarnated. Now, in Hinduism, while there is no notion of hell and an eternal damnation for living a horrible life, there are consequences for your actions. In Hinduism, you can be reincarnated. You can get another chance to purify your soul and eventually go home, but you can be knocked down the ladder a number of different rungs. If you live a terrible life, you may not come back as another human being. According to Hinduism, the spirit of Brahma, this holy essence, infuses all living beings. That includes not just humans, but the animal world as well. So if you're a serial killer, you throw kittens at the wall for fun, you're just a terrible, terrible person, you may not come back as a human being. You might come back as a rat or a cockroach, and you might have to live 1,000 lifetimes as a virtuous cockroach before you can move up to being a snake and such. So there are consequences for your bad actions in Hinduism, and that's why there's a tremendous emphasis on living a virtuous life and treating all living beings with respect. That also is why many Hindus today, not all, but many Hindus are vegetarians. And over time, Hinduism has grown to become the world's third largest religion after Christianity and Islam, claiming about 13% of the world's population. In places like Nepal, India, and Sri Lanka, it is especially prevalent. Another major legacy of the Aryan invasion is the caste system. You might think of a caste loosely as a class, only the caste system that will develop in ancient India will be incredibly rigid. The invading Aryans will set themselves at the top of this caste system. They will put themselves in positions of political and military leadership. And broadly speaking, anyone who was darker skinned than them was to inhabit a lower caste or a lower class. In fact, the original 4 castes were known as the 4 Katavarnas, which means the 4 colors. And so for the invading Aryans, the darker-skinned native Harappan peoples were not to be considered their equals. And over time, this caste system grew and developed, and the original 4 castes became 5, and then ultimately you'll have a 5th caste known as the Untouchables, which are considered to be barely human in the eyes of the other castes. They are to live a life separate and apart. They're outcasts, really. That's where we get that term from in our language today. They are so far outside the other lives of the 4 castes that they are not allowed to mingle with them. They are oftentimes given the most demeaning, menial jobs: butchers, garbage collectors, those who handle dead flesh, and other things. So this caste system will become more rigid over time, not more flexible. And everything about your caste is determined, about your life is determined according to what caste you were born into. You were born into a caste, you stay in that caste your entire life. It affects who you marry. You don't really marry up or marry down. It affects what foods you might eat. It affects what gods you might worship in Hinduism. It really is an incredibly restrictive system that, when it was initially developed, was developed as a tool to keep the majority of the population subservient to the invading Aryans. Now, unlike with China, where we have a series of ruling dynasties and some attempts made over time to centralize power, it's going to be a much different picture in the Indian subcontinent. A lot of chronic warfare, we might call it civil war, between various factions, each one jealous of the other and unwilling to give up their power except through military conquest. So it's going to take some time before we see a centralized political and military empire in the form of the Mauryan Empire, which will come to power under the brutal ruler Chandragupta, who will use chronic warfare to basically subdue these peoples forcibly. And he will go on to divide his empire into various administrative districts, and really had also set up a system of spies. He was always listening in on his peoples, wondering if they were getting ready to revolt against him. Chandragupta's grandson, Ashoka, pictured here, was cut from the same cloth as his grandfather. He too was a very fierce military ruler. He conquered a tremendous amount of territory through warfare, bringing it under his rule, extending the Mauryan Empire to the present-day boundaries of Bangladesh in the east, and to present-day Iran and Afghanistan in the west, and pushing down almost to the peninsular tip of southern India. Ashoka's armies did this through a very long and incredibly brutal process. For instance, it's estimated that during just one 2-year campaign, the Kalinga War between 265 and 263 BC, that Ashoka's armies killed perhaps as many as 100,000 individuals in the region. Unlike his grandfather, however, Ashoka, the violence started to get to him over time. During this period, if you're a ruler like Chandragupta or Ashoka, you are in battle with your armies. You're not sitting somewhere safely, it's kind of insulated from all the carnage around you. You're witnessing it, you're participating in it. And so after a while, all this upheaval and seeing all the orphans that were created as a result of so much death around them, all the disfigurement, the bloodshed, Ashoka kind of had a crisis of conscience. He will ultimately decide to embrace the philosophy of Buddhism, and when he does, it will change his rule significantly. So now is a good time for us to understand Buddhism, a philosophy that really finds its heart in the founding light of Siddhartha Gautama, who lived during the 6th century BC, probably in northern India near present-day Nepal. Now, Siddhartha had everything he could want growing up. He was growing up the son of a sort of lesser member of the nobility. They had servants in their household, a walled, protective compound in which he grew up in. But as he grew into a young man, and he married and fathered a young son, he saw the life that was mapped out for him and decided that he wanted to at least see the world a little bit before he got involved in taking over his father's business of rule. In doing so, he went out, and the trip that he took changed him forever. When he returned to his father's household, he returned only to say goodbye, to kiss his wife and his child goodbye, to turn his back on the life of luxury that he had been accustomed to, and to instead embrace the life of a poor, wandering Hindu mystic, literally to carrying a bowl from household to household begging for his food. The key is that when he took his initial trip into the world, he was shocked. He was alarmed at the level of suffering around him. And he is consumed with sort of these epic questions of what is the cause of human suffering. So after a number of years dedicating his life to spiritual pursuits, he will have in meditation, after one long night's worth of meditation, he will have an awakening. And from that point forward, he will have several insights into the nature of human suffering. And his followers from that point will begin calling him the Buddha, or one who has awakened or been enlightened. He will develop the concept of the Four Noble Truths, each of which you need to study and know. Suffering dominates the human experience. The cause of our suffering is our desires or cravings. That it is possible, in the Third Noble Truth, to extinguish our suffering by getting rid of our desires or cravings for things. And then finally, the Fourth Noble Truth, you can achieve nirvana by following the so-called Noble Eightfold Path. I want you to study these in more detail in your textbook because they're pretty important. So Ashoka will embrace this philosophy, and it will change his life forever.